So imagine you're walking through a massive adult entertainment convention. The noise is deafening, the lights are blinding.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, and everywhere you look, human intimacy is being, heavily commodified. It's an environment built entirely on transactional relationships and constructed personas.
Right, highly transactional.
Exactly. And right in the middle of all this chaos, there is a booth. But the people running it aren't selling videos. They're handing out customized Bibles. And printed right on the front cover, in bold letters, is the phrase, Jesus loves porn stars.
Wow. I mean, that is a profound psychological disruption. You walk in there expecting judgment or, exploitation, and instead you are handed the statement of just radical, unconditional acceptance.
Yeah, it really is. And welcome to this deep dive. Today we are wading into a highly complex, deeply personal, and honestly sometimes controversial arena. We're looking at the intersection of Christian faith-based interventions and recovery for survivors of the adult entertainment industry.
We really have a massive snack of compelling sources today.
We do. We've got this in-depth academic research from Dr. Gina Alert, who studies faith-based care shelters. And we're pairing her data with the lived experiences of former industry professionals, people like Brittany Delamora, Shelley Lovin, Casey McClure, and Donnie Pauling.
And our mission here is really to unpack the psychological mechanisms behind these specific recovery programs. We want to decode how trauma-informed spiritual care actually works on a day-to-day basis,
Right.
how it impacts the rebuilding of a person's identity, and how it facilitates post-traumatic growth. We are focusing purely on the how and the why.
Absolutely. But before we go any further, a crucial disclaimer for you listening. Because of the nature of these interventions, the sources we are looking at contain heavily religiously themed content.
Right, very heavily themed.
Yeah. So we want to be abundantly clear here. This deep dive is completely impartial. Neither of us is endorsing, validating, or promoting these specific religious viewpoints. Our goal is just to objectively report on the source material to understand the perspectives, the data, and the realities of these individuals. So, okay, let's unpack this.
The best place to start is definitely with the macro level data,
Yeah.
because it reveals a care landscape that is honestly quite surprising.
Oh, definitely surprising.
Yeah, so Dr. Gina Alert's research quantifies the sheer prevalence of these faith-based programs. She found that an estimated 63% of shelter programs for sex trafficking and exploitation survivors in the U.S. identify as Christian-affiliated.
That number is massive. 63%. I mean, that means the majority of the care infrastructure for survivors in this country is rooted in a religious framework. And Dr. Alert points out that this brings up a lot of clinical skepticism. Like the Pew Research data she cites highlights that we live in a very secular society. So clinical professionals have raised, honestly, very valid fears that introducing spiritual programming to vulnerable survivors might actually re-traumatize them.
Especially if they have a history of religious abuse. It's a fear grounded in clinical reality. If spiritual care is coercive, it strips away the survivor's autonomy all over again.
Right.
The Dr. Alert's study didn't just look at the clinical assumptions. Her team actually went straight to the source. They conducted a trauma-informed survey of 158 survivors who had resided in these Christian programs to find out what was actually happening on the ground.
And the numbers from the survivors themselves completely challenged some of those clinical assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Out of those 158 individuals, 84% self-identified as Christian. Yeah, and over 75% stated they specifically entered these faith-based shelters because they wanted to reconnect with or begin a relationship with God. So for the vast majority, the faith element wasn't some hidden trap, It was the primary draw.
That changes the context entirely.
It does. Furthermore, 65% indicated absolutely no discomfort with the religious practices in the shelters.
We do have to balance that, though, with the rest of the data, because approximately 9.5% of the respondents described feeling pressure to conform to the religious practices.
Right, it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
For that 84%, faith acts as a life raft.
Yeah.
It's the thing keeping them afloat in terrifying waters.
A literal lifeline.
Exactly. Yeah. But for the 9.5% who felt pressured, if that faith is forced on them, like if attendance at a chapel service is required just to get a meal, you're not tossing them a life raft anymore. You're throwing them an anchor that pulls them right back under.
And that is the exact core tension Dr. Alert's research addresses. What separates the life raft from the anchor? The data points directly to the implementation of trauma-informed principles.
So break that down for us. What does a trauma-informed principle actually look like in a faith-based shelter?
In a really practical sense, it means returning power to the survivor. If a program is trauma-informed, a resident can say, I do not want to attend Bible study today, or I don't want to pray.
And they aren't punished for that.
Exactly. The staff responds with, that is completely fine. Your bed is still yours, your meals are secure, and you are still safe here. There is no punitive measure for opting out.
That is so important.
It really is. When a program operates with that level of respect for autonomy, Dr. Alert found it successfully facilitates community belonging, forgiveness, and renewed spirituality. It basically proves that religion doesn't inherently hinder recovery. It's the method of delivery that dictates the outcome.
But if the industry isolates these individuals so completely, we have to look at what they're actually recovering from. Like, we need to examine the psychological trap of the adult entertainment industry itself.
Oh, absolutely, because that context explains why such specialized intensive intervention is required in the first place.
Right. So let's put you, the listener, in the shoes of someone navigating this space. Imagine you're Casey McClure, the founder of the organization ForceSarah.
Her story is incredible.
It is. She endured severe abuse starting at age 3. By the time she's 18, she is dancing in strip clubs in Atlanta. To the outside world, she's making $1,000 a night. She looks independent, wealthy, empowered.
But Casey describes this as a total trap,
A
right?
complete trap. She found herself bound by the lifestyle, the nocturnal hours, the isolation from normal society, and just this paralyzing financial dependence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Casey's story is not an outlier. It is the blueprint. There is a deeply documented pattern across these accounts. Early childhood, trauma like sexual abuse or severe neglect almost always precedes entry into the industry.
You see that blueprint perfectly in Shelley Levin's writings, too. Her origin story is just devastating. Sexually abused at age 9, kicked out of her house at 18.
Gosh.
Yeah. She ended up on the streets selling herself for $35.
Yeah.
And she notes that she transitioned into the pornography industry because, logically, she thought it would be safer and more regulated than street prostitution.
Which, I mean, is a really common survival calculation.
Exactly. You can understand the logic. But the reality was the exact opposite of safety. She faced severe degradation, physical violence, hardcore scenarios that she could only endure by completely dissociating through heavy drug and alcohol use.
The promise of safety was just a mirage.
A total mirage. And then look at Brittany De La Mora's trajectory. On the surface, her entry looks different. She wasn't fleeing street prostitution. She equated promiscuity with female empowerment.
She really chased the fame, right?
Yeah, the fame, the massive paychecks, the validation of being featured in major magazines. She was making hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But the psychological toll caught up just the same. Behind all those magazine covers, Brittany was battling a severe heroin addiction. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar depression.
It's just wild. The industry's promise of validation and fast money is essentially like drinking salt water when you're dying of thirst.
That's a great way to put it.
In the moment you take a drink, it feels like you're solving your problem. Yeah. Your need to be wanted, your need to survive financially. But psychologically, it is rapidly accelerating your internal destruction.
Because the trap isn't just the contract or the money, it is fundamentally psychological. In the adult industry, you are required to adopt a persona to survive the things being done to you and the things you are doing.
Yep.
Over time, that persona entirely consumes your original identity. You lose the ability to differentiate between the character you play on camera and the human being you actually are. Escape feels impossible because if you leave the persona behind, you just don't know who is left underneath.
And when someone is buried that deep inside a persona, isolated by shame, highly defensive, I mean, you can't just slide a brochure for a local clinic under their door and expect them to show up.
No, absolutely not.
The intervention has to bypass those massive defensive walls, which really forces these faith-based groups to use incredibly unconventional direct outreach tactics.
They cannot wait for survivors to seek help. They have to go to where the individuals are, physically and emotionally.
Just look at how Casey McClure operates for Sarah. She uses her own lived experience to train outreach teams. They don't wait in a church basement. They walk directly into the strip clubs in Atlanta.
Wow, right into the clubs.
Right into the clubs. They bring gifts. They build relationships with the women in the dressing rooms. They also operate call centers specifically designed to reach out to women working independently online. They were actively stepping into the environment.
And that brings us back to the XXX Church approach we mentioned at the beginning. Their methodology is a masterclass in psychological disruption. Setting up a booth inside a massive adult video convention is deeply intentional.
It is. And Brittany De La Mora actually met the XX Church team at one of these porn conventions. They're handing out those Bibles that say, Jesus loves porn stars. And on the back cover, it reads, he loves porn stars as much as he loves pastors.
Wait, I have to stop you there, though. A deeply religious group walking into the middle of a porn convention, doesn't that just invite intense hostility?
Oh, for sure.
It feels reckless, like a medic running onto a live battlefield without a helmet or any backup.
It is a battlefield. And the hostility is very real. But that radical vulnerability is precisely why the tactic works. When you are deeply entrenched in the adult industry, as Brittany noted, you are conditioned to expect two things from the outside world. People either want to exploit you or they want to judge you.
Right, your psychological defenses are just impenetrable.
Exactly. But by showing up on that battlefield and leading with radical, unconditional acceptance, these groups bypass the shame entirely. When you hand someone a Bible that explicitly names their profession and pairs it with love rather than condemnation, you completely disarm them.
You create a crack in the persona.
Yes, you create a crack.
Yeah.
And that crack allows the message to get through. It reached Brittany, but it also reached someone on the other side of the camera, Donnie Pauling.
Now, Donnie's story is fascinating because it shifts the perspective from the performer to the producer.
Yeah, Donnie was actually a pastor's son. He grew up in the church, but grew incredibly cynical and bitter toward it. He had exceptional computer skills, started a secret porn site, and eventually built a business so successful it supplied content directly to Playboy.
Wow.
And after going through a divorce, he stopped hiding his double life, and his business absolutely exploded. The financial data from his account notes that in the first month after his divorce, he grossed over $50,000.
So he is financially thriving, deeply entrenched, and highly cynical about religion.
Exactly. But he attends a Las Vegas adult convention, and he encounters the XX Church booth. It wasn't a fiery sermon that got to him. It was their consistent, non-judgmental outreach over time.
Just showing up.
Just showing up. That radical acceptance eventually led him to walk away from a massive, highly lucrative business model.
Which really transitions us from the initial contact to the actual mechanics of transformation. Like, we've established how these groups break through the defensive walls, but what happens next? How does adopting a trauma-informed spiritual framework actually rebuild a survivor's shattered psyche?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the actual breaking points for these individuals often happen in completely mundane settings, yet the psychological shifts are monumental.
Oh, totally.
Take Brittany's breaking point. She's sitting on a commercial airplane, flying to Las Vegas to shoot another scene. She opens a Bible she had been given years prior, and she reads Revelation 2, verses 20 through 24. It's a passage addressing sexual immorality.
On an airplane, of all places.
On an airplane. And in that solitary moment, despite all her terrifying fears of losing her income and her entire way of life, she describes feeling a sudden, overwhelming promise of peace.
The immediacy of her response is really what stands out in clinical terms.
She quits the industry immediately. She walks away from a potential six-figure monthly income. And to survive, she takes a job paying $11.25 an hour working as a receptionist.
Wow.
She did it just to rebuild her life, honestly. I mean, the sheer magnitude of that lifestyle shift is staggering. It's like deleting the entire operating system of your life, the software that processes your money, dictates your relationships, governs your daily habits, and installing a completely new one from scratch while the computer's still running.
That operating system analogy is perfect for understanding the concept of identity formation that Dr. Alert discusses in her research. What a trauma-informed religious framework provides, psychologically speaking, is a completely new, pre-built value system.
So how did that system overwrite the old one?
Well, in the adult industry, a survivor's self-worth is entirely tied to physical commodification. Your value is your financial output, your youth, your willingness to endure extremes. You are a product. When a survivor installs this new operating system of faith, their inherent value is suddenly decoupled from their physical body. The spiritual framework tells them they have infinite value simply because they exist, unconditionally.
They don't have to perform to be worthy.
Precisely. And this new framework is what allows for genuine forgiveness of oneself. In recovery, self-forgiveness is often the hardest hurdle. Survivors carry immense shame for the things they did to survive.
No, I'm sure.
A faith-based framework provides a structured mechanism for grace. It allows them to grieve the trauma, acknowledge the past, without being forever defined by it. This is the very definition of post-traumatic growth.
You see that growth so clearly in Shelley Lubin's transformation. She goes from surviving extreme violence and hardcore pornography to meeting her husband, Garrett. She specifically notes that Garrett was willing to be, quote, a friend to a prostitute,
Offering her genuine care.
without expecting anything in return. They attend a local church. She goes on to earn a degree in theology, and she channels her trauma into purpose by starting the Pink Cross Foundation to rescue others. She even reported experiencing profound physical and emotional healing, noting she was cured of illnesses she contracted in the industry.
Her growth wasn't just surviving, it was comprehensive flourishing.
Yeah.
It is a total restructuring of the self. They are no longer defined by what was done to them, but by what they are building.
Let's take a step back and look at the massive journey we've covered through these sources today. We started with Dr. Alert's data, revealing the surprising reality that 63% of survivor care shelters are faith-based.
And that when trauma-informed principles protect an individual's autonomy, spiritual care becomes a highly sought-after catalyst for healing.
We examined the brutal psychological trap of the adult entertainment industry. We saw how early childhood trauma is exploited and how the false promise of empowerment forces individuals to build personas that ultimately consume their true identities.
And we looked at the radical outreach strategies required to break through that isolation. Groups like XX Church and Foursquare are walking straight into strip clubs and conventions, stripping away all judgment and meeting people exactly where they are.
And finally, we explored the mechanics of identity formation. We saw how adopting a new spiritual framework completely decouples a person's worth from their physical body, allowing survivors like Brittany, Shelley, Casey, and Donnie to leave behind massive incomes to find genuine peace and post-traumatic growth.
It's an incredible shift.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to reflect on your own life for a moment. Obviously, most of us listening aren't navigating the extreme trauma of the adult entertainment industry, but human psychology is universal.
It really is.
How often do you seek your own validation in places or in personas that ultimately drain you? We chase a specific job title, a salary bracket, or a curated social media image, thinking it will finally make us feel like we're enough, only to find ourselves feeling more empty.
It takes immense courage to walk away from a system that is rewarding you financially, even when you know it is destroying you internally.
It does. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. It's a concept heavily implied by our sources today. The ripple effect.
Oh, the ripple effect, yes.
Consider the macro impact of these individual recoveries on the world at large. If a major pornography producer like Donnie Pauling, who was supplying massive amounts of content to entities like Playboy, completely reverses his life and permanently pulls his supply.
Right.
Or if a star like Britney, who had hundreds of thousands of followers consuming her content daily, suddenly unplugs and exits. What does that mean for the millions of people who consume their work?